Today's filming is dedicated for a Yeshua for the Am Yisrael in this difficult time, a Shemir for the Chayalim, a Tzolach for the Shluyim. And today's filming, we're going to start. Uh, First of all, we have gratitude to Bill because he made my mother a nice bagel. Very big appreciation for you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. And today's Yomi is Bava Basra Daf Hey, Bava Basra 5. We're going to start on the top of Hey Amid Aleph. And the Gemara first tells us a story because we have been discussing what's the law with respect to a person who puts up a fence and then he wants his neighbor to pay his share of the fence. The Gemara had different opinions on this matter. Now we have an actual case law. Runya akfe Ravina me arba ruchosav. So Ravina surrounded Runya on four sides with a fence. And so the Mishnah had said, according to Rabbi Yossi, if you do that, you have to pay. So Amalei Havli Kama de Gadri. So he says, pay for your share of the fence. So Runya says, Lo Yaivle. Runya didn't want to give it to him because Havli Lefi Kanem Bezol. He says, okay, at least give me the equivalent of the cheapest way of building the fence. If you don't want to pay, like for the actual fence it did, all right, give me the cheapest way I can build the fence. Give me half of that. So he says, well, yeah, he didn't give him the money. He says, Havli Agar Netirusa. Okay, if you don't want to give me the money for the fence, at least pay the minimum is what you'd pay a security guard for the season to watch your crops. Well, yeah, he didn't want to give me the money for that. Runya doesn't want to pay anything. He says, I don't need a fence. Yom Echad Avakagader Diklei. So one day, Ravina was biding his time. One day, Runya was harvesting his dates. Amrle Larise, so he says to his sharecropper, so Ravina says to his sharecropper, Zil shakel mine kibura da'ahini. He says, go grab from him here, pass the Gemara to, oh, there he is. Go grab from him a cluster of the grapes. Go grab from him a cluster of grapes. Azo Lasuye Rami Bekola. He went to grab it, and then Runya started yelling at him. Aha, says Ravina. Galita daitach the menach nichoach. I see you like protection. You like your security protection. Well, first of all, before we give, he says, he says, if it was just goats coming in, wouldn't you need some protection there? Wouldn't you need somebody to scream? And so he says, no. So don't you need a man? Don't you need to hire a man? You were saying, I said, for goats, when you need something, he says, yeah, just have somebody to scream at him. He says, well, don't you need to hire that person and pay that person? So Asla Kame to Rava, they came to Rava, and Rava said, Zil Faise b'maydi Fayis. He says, go and pay him what he's asking for. He's just asking for half the security guard costs below, and if you're not going to pay him that, if you're not going to do that, then I'll throw upon you the law of Rafuna according to Rabbi Yossi. So, which is what we said yesterday, that Rafuna said Rabbi Yossi requires you to pay half of the actual cost, not half of the minimum costs. So he says, pay this. If not, I'll make you pay that. So first, there's a couple of things here. Is how could Ravina have said to his sharecropper, go and steal? You're not allowed to steal. How could he have done that? And even Gneva Manasla Mekat is also prohibited. If you're just stealing as a joke and you're going to return it, it's still considered theft. So how could he have told him to do that? So this is a question the commentaries ask. So one of the answers that they gave is that he was preparing to sell it, and so since he was preparing to sell it, so therefore, for this reason, he was going to take it. But clearly, here also, he wasn't intending to harass him. He was intending to show what his actions were. Also, another question is: we see that Rava was going to say here, "Pay this, and if not, I'll make you pay that." But is a judge allowed to do that? Is a judge allowed to pay more than what the person was asking for? Is the judge allowed to say, if you're saying you owe me $100 and the judge looks at the case and says, actually, I think he owes you $500. Is the judge allowed to say that? So this case was not cited by the Rambam. So some want to say this proves that a judge is not allowed to do that. A judge can't demand more, that you pay more than what you're asking for. But that's a question that they debate about this. Okay, so now we have the next sugya. Runyan Zaben Ara Mitra de Ravina. Sava Ravina was Saluki Mishum Dina de Bar Mitzra. Okay, so now we have the case of Bar Mitzra, which we had in Bava Mitzia. Remember, we had this at the end of Bava Mitzia. What's the law of Bar Mitzra? We saw the law of Bar Mitzra is that all things being equal, which is the key word, a neighbor has the right of first refusal to buy the adjoining property before he sells it to somebody else. That's all things being equal, which they're never actually equal, but all things being equal, the neighbor has the right to buy something, to buy the adjoining property. So in this case, Runya bought the adjoining property of Ravina, and Ravina said, listen, I want to get rid of him because of the law of Bar Mitzra. I have the right to that property. It's easier for me. I want to get rid of it. Amoy Rav Safra, Berei de Rav Yeva, Ravina. So Rav Safra comes along, and Rav Safra says, Amri Inchi, Arbo Etzela, Arbo Etzloa. And he says, no, basically, the people say there's an expression, four for the Tzela, four for the Tzloa. What's the story even doing here? Probably because it's Runya and Ravina again. But what does this phrase mean? Arbo Etzela, Arbo Etzloa. So there's, in the Masifta Shas, they offer 10 different explanations for this. And Rash himself offers 3. I'm just going to share now for this. Actually, Mesifta Shas offers, wait, did I say 10 explanations? They offered not 10 explanations, but they offer maybe even more than that. But so I'm just going to offer the explanation of Rashi. Rashi has 3. I'm just going to offer one of them, and Yad Ramah. So one of Rashi's explanations is that basically he says, Rav Safra Breder Rav Yeva is saying to Ravina, listen, he's a shoemaker. The shoemaker, he pays 4 for the tan, he pays 4 for the hide, and then he tans it, he pays 4. At the end of the day, he doesn't get anything. That the shoemaker, he's a poor shoemaker, and they both get, and by the time he's done paying, he has no money, he has no profit. Meaning to say, he gives 4 zuzim to the guy, to the tanner, and he sells it in the shuk, and he gets very little money. He pays 4 for the tan and 4 for the hide and 4 for the tanner. He makes nothing. And so Ruya, he's a shoemaker. He's a poor man. He's not making any money. And what's the reason why you're supposed to give the law of Bar Mitzra? Why are you supposed to give it to the neighbor? Because to do what's good and right in the eyes of God. Well, this man is poor, so do good by him and give him 4. And let him take the land. Another explanation, the Arama, is that he says, just like we say, that the rich man is the owner of the hide, and the poor man is the tanner. Tanner's a very bad job; it's a smelly job. That at the end of your life, you both end up with 4 cubits in the ground. Everybody goes to the same place. So since everybody goes to the same place, everybody's only getting the same 4 cubits. Even though you're rich, don't think you're better, and be nicer to them, because you're both going to the same place. You're both ending up below the ground. And so therefore, Arba Etzela, Arba Etzloa, might as well just help him out. So therefore, even though technically speaking, you might be entitled to it, says the Yad Ramah, don't stand by that. Go beyond the letter of the law. Okay, now we're up to the next Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, Kosel Chatzer Shenafal. Let's say you have a wall in a courtyard that you fell down. Mechayvin also with noso at Arba Amos. We make them build it up until 4 cubits, because 4 cubits is 6 feet, and that's enough to stop the prevention of damage through sight. But now and the Mishnah is going to deal with this money that you paid. Let's say one of them said, after they built it, I built it all for myself because he didn't want to help me, and now he's asking for his half. The other person says, no, I gave my part. We believe him that he contributed. And we believe him that he contributed until the builder brings proof that he didn't give him the money. From 4 cubits and above, now, even though the wall might have been 6 cubits high, we don't make him pay to rebuild the exact wall. We just make him pay up until 4 cubits. So we don't make him pay more than 4 cubits. But let's say the person after one of them builds in more than 4 cubits, and the other guy says, I don't want to contribute to that. Then the second person who said he didn't want to contribute, he puts another wall next to this first wall in order to make like a little gazebo or a little rooftop there, or like a little shack. So he puts his own wall next to it. Even though he didn't put the roof on yet, we make him pay for everything because it's very clear now that he wants this extra height there. And so since he's benefiting from it, we make him pay for his share of that. And we say, at this point, we say, and now for this extra part, there's the assumption that he didn't give the money until he brings a proof that he gave the money. Let's say the first guy comes and claims him afterwards, after he puts up his wall, the second wall, and says, look, it proves that he actually wanted the first wall to be taller. And then he says, oh, I gave you the money. He's not believed unless he has witnesses, because that law was not clear to everybody, Rashi says, and until the court pays him, he wouldn't have given the money under those circumstances. The first case, we assumed he gave the money right away, and that's what the Gemara is going to discuss. When do we assume a person paid, and when do we not assume a person has paid? So the Gemara says, Amar Reish Lakish, Hakoveya. You want some water? Amar Reish Lakish, Hakoveya Zman Chavero. So Reish Lakish says, let's say a person lends somebody else money, and he says, okay, you have to pay back the debt on August 1st. And now he comes August 1st, he says, where's my money? He says, I paid you back on July 15th. Eino Neman. We don't believe him. Assumption at this point is we don't believe him because we don't believe that people pay their debts early. And Reish Lakish says, if only he would pay on the proper time, we'll be happy. Meaning to say that just pay on the proper time is all that we need. And we'll be happy. So according to Reish Lakish seems to be saying here, we don't assume that a person pays his. We don't assume that he was that he would pay his debt in advance. We don't assume that. Abai v'Rav the Amri Travayu Avid inish tepara begos zimne. Abai and Rava argue with Reish Lakish, and they say a person will pay within the time that he pays. Because why? Because zimnin de misramule zuze. Because sometimes he'll have the money and he'll say Amar Ezel Ifrai. He says I'll go and I'll pay my debt in advance. He says I'll go and pay my debt in advance. So that the lender is not going to harass me to pay when it comes to time to pay. So therefore, he's believed to pay within the period of time. So again, what's going on here? That there's a dispute between Reish Lakish, who says a person won't pay his debt in advance, and Abai and Rav will say he will pay his debt in advance. And so therefore, for this reason, if it comes to be the case that a person is paid his debt, that it comes the date and he says, I paid you, Reish Lakish says we don't believe him, but Abai and Rabbi would say that he's more believed. So the Gemara says, so let's try and prove this case like Abai and Rava, and not like Reish Lakish from our Mishnah, because we learned in our Mishnah. We learned in our Mishnah that if one of the partners built a wall and now he says, pay me my share, and the other one claims that he already paid it, until 4 cubits, he's believed until 4 cubits, he's believed under the assumption that he gave the money and he's exempt from having to pay. Until the guy who put up the wall brings a proof that the other person didn't give the money. Now, what's the scenario? If you want to say, listen, I paid my share right when you finished to build the wall. Well, it's clear that the assumption is that he paid at that time. So because that's what we said. So what must we say we're talking about? Must be we're talking about a case where he says, I paid it earlier. And Alma Avid Inish depart b'toch money. So we see from here that a person is believed to pay his debt in advance. That's what's going on here. Gemara says, no. Shani Achi, no, this case is different. Why? To call Shafa v'Shafa Zimniu. Because every row of bricks, that's when he puts up his row of the wall, his row of the bricks, that's considered to be his row. And so therefore, that's going to be considered to be the time to pay it. And so therefore, that's what he's believed to say. He paid it even before the completion of the wall. But in the time where it's not the completion of the project, that like a loan, then we wouldn't believe him. The Gemara says another attempt, but now the Gemara is going to challenge Abaye and Rava. Abaye and Rava say that a person will pay his debt in advance so that the guy was not going to harass him at a later time. So we learned in our Mishnah that if the wall was higher than 4 cubits, then the assumption is that he didn't give the money. If first he didn't want to build it, but then after he put up the wall, it proved that he actually did want the higher wall. And the assumption is he didn't give the money unless he brings a proof that he gave the money. Now, what's his case? If we say, listen, I paid at the proper time, why wouldn't we believe him? Of course you believe him. He said, no, I paid within the time. And the part goes in there. And we don't believe him. We see from here a person is not believed to pay within the time. Gemara says, no, this case is different. This case is different. No, here we don't believe him that he would have paid within the proper time because we say this person would have argued, how do I know that the rabbis will make me pay? This is more than 4 cubits high. Maybe this is not a law that everybody knows. Not everybody knows this law, that if it's more than 4 cubits, but you ended up wanting it, will make you pay. So therefore he went to pay it early. Because he says, I haven't used this wall yet. It's a more complicated law. Gemara says, what's that law here? They ruled like Abaye and Rava that a person would pay within the proper time. Whereas Mar Baravashi ruled like Reish Lakish that a person doesn't pay his debt within the proper time, and so therefore he's not believed if that's his claim. Hilchas like Reish Lakish, and the law is like Reish Lakish that we don't believe him that he paid in the proper time. Even if the borrower dies and the lender makes a claim from the orphans, that normally speaking, by an oral loan, the orphans are not obligated to pay because we claim that maybe their father paid. But in this case, where the claim would be that he paid within the proper time, we're going to say, no, the father didn't pay. And so therefore you can make a claim against the orphans. And even though typically speaking, if somebody wants to collect from the orphans, we only allow them to collect if they take an oath. Here we're not going to require it. Most people don't pay within their proper time. Now I would assume that this is only when there's no financial advantage to paying within the proper time because there was no interest. But nowadays, there's a big financial advantage to paying your debt off early because you're basically making money by beating the mortgage rates or by beating the interest rates. So therefore, it wouldn't apply under those circumstances. We'll just raise the next question. Oh, so now the guy makes the claim from him after the time that it was due, but he says, I paid you within the time that it was due. So basically, so what will be the law in this case? Do we say that the law is that he's not believed because there's a presumption that person doesn't pay within the proper time? Or maybe we should believe him because we have a migu that if he really wanted to, he could have said, he could have done a better lie and he could have said, I paid it at the proper time. And then he would have been believed. And so that's a proof that he's telling the truth. Do we say that this idea that we say you could have done a better lie, does that still work even though there's a chazaka? The presumption is a person doesn't pay within the proper time. Do we still say then, why would I have given this lie? I could have given a better lie. So, do we not claim that and say, because no, there's a presumption, so we don't allow the migo to work there. So the Gemara is going to bring this up on tomorrow's daf, and we'll pick that up tonight, God willing. Everybody should have an amazing day. Ayash Shakoach. If anybody has any questions, happy